everyone. Welcome back to the Divine Counsel Worldview podcast. This is Mel. I'm here with my buddy Rich. And today we are joined with our good buddy, our tres amigo, Mike Chu. So hey Mike's joining us, and we're just, you guys kind of already know who he is, but we're gonna have like a little bit more of a personal conversation. We're not gonna get too deep in the theology, but you guys already know that's the deal with Rich and I.
Yeah,
we're more action oriented than we are, not that we don't care about theology, we do, but it's more like, what are we doing with it? So, welcome to the show, Mike. Glad to have you. Glad you could make the time.
Yeah, glad to be on here.
Did you guys do anything cool today? I know I did. I got to celebrate one of my friends here his 95th birthday. He was born in 1930. His name is Bob Hill. He was like a physicist. I mean, he has many degrees, but yeah, 95 years old, man. Take him out to lunch, went to the Bible study this morning. It's just incredible to be able to talk to a man like that over the many decades he has lived as a Christian, because he got saved when he was like 10. So 85 years as a Christian, walking through, that would be some of World War II and then all of the rest that has gone on, and be able to ask what do you think? He still reads a book like almost every night. I mean, he's, a brilliant guy. And, to be able to ask him questions is just one of those beautiful things that just seems to be lost for many younger people, taking the time and talking to people like that. Because much of the information he may have, you can find on Google, you can watch on YouTube. But to get it straight from the man, is just an incredible thing. So anyway, happy birthday, Bob. Love you, buddy.
Yeah, happy birthday, Bob. I would love to have a friend. I don't have any friends that are physicists. I wish I did. And I wish I had one. And I wish I had one that was like, that had that kind of like historical experience, because that would have some like really crazy conversations.
Yeah, He talks a little bit slow, but like it's all there, man. And I'm just like, that's impressive. You got more cognitive brain abilities than I do.
So he was like born like 1920-ish or so.
In 1930. 1930.
Whoa. Yeah. So he was like 15 when World War II ended. I mean, he was almost coming up on draft age,
Yeah, his dad was, I think, World War I.
Did he have to participate in the Korean War? Because he would have been of age.
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far, but I do know that his neighbor, when he was growing up, had fought in the Civil War or whatever it was,
my gosh,
whatever that was. We were like, what? Because I was introduced. So there's this young guy at this restaurant that my pastor is really trying to reach. He's like 19. And so me and him were talking to him, and we were talking about something like that. And he mentioned that, and we're like, man, That's crazy.
You were essentially 2 degrees separated from someone in the Civil War. Granted, he's not alive anymore.
Yeah.
But
he's like 5 years younger than me and my wife combined.
And he basically got to experience World War II, but it's like as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Essentially a 10, 11-year-old and listening through all the craziness of that decade.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it was fun, man. All right. Anyway, let's get into it, gentlemen. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, where do you want to start, Mike? Let's see, Mike. Give us kind of a brief overview of like your testimony. Like about what age did you kind of realize you needed Jesus? And then about what age did you kind of think, I think I want to do this? More like on a more full-time dedicated basis.
So I guess to kind of give a little bit of background, my family, I was born in Boston. So I'm born and bred Bostonian. I had an older sister. Her name was Ruth. And funny enough, she was actually the first one to see. My mom grew up in a Christian home, but I think by the time she and my dad came to the States, she was kind of on and off with that. It was my sister who eventually actually became a born again Christian in the first place. And in that vein, she started praying and thinking about, well, what if I bring Michael over to the church that was like about 5 minutes away from us? It's a Chinese heritage church that's right in the heart of Chinatown in Boston. And so I started going to church when I was about 7 years old. But for the most part, the main reason I wanted to go was because that was the only time I could ever drink fruit punch and also have crackers and cookies and other little, like, American type style junk food, which was really cool. And I realized, I can memorize all the answers to the Sunday school questions, and I'll get all the right answers and whatever else. But if I'm really honest and being honest about it, I didn't actually want to become a Christian. I think for the most part, I learned all the stuff about the Christian faith. I learned about Jesus, about the cross, about why he had to come to die for our sins and everything. But I was convinced that I do want to go to heaven, but I also wanted to live my life the way I wanted to live. And so I kind of came up in my mind this scheme where eventually I'll just live the way I want to. And I know this is not imaginative, but basically I would just accept Jesus into my heart on my deathbed and then hopefully go right in. Yeah. And that was the thought. And it wasn't until friends within the Sunday school at the church, they started inviting me to come to the youth fellowship. And one of my Sunday school teachers, he was a really cool guy. And I think over time, as I started listening to their testimonies, as they shared about what they were like before they gave their lives to Christ, and then I'm seeing who they are becoming or who they are at that moment, the difference was so palpable. But I still was struggling with, I still wanted to live my life the way I wanted to. And it wasn't until I'm at a summer job, my first real summer job at 15. It was a junior counselor position for a summer school. And 4 or 5 year olds, I had a group of kids that I was taking care of. And we all went out to do this like little field trip to Plymouth, Massachusetts. And the other counselors who have been part of this summer camp for years, they decided to do an initiation for me and some of the newer folks. But what they didn't realize was that I couldn't swim. And so when they picked me up and they were dragging me out into the water, I didn't initially panic because I had seen as a kid all these G.I. Joe infomercials about if you get thrown into the water, just do something with your legs and scissors wise, and you'll float and you'll be fine. But what I didn't realize was that they dropped me into the water. My back hit the water first, and I got completely swallowed by the water. And these 3, teen boys had no idea why was I not floating back up to the top. They were just staring down, wondering what's going on.
Why is he not floating?
Yeah, he's not floating. And I remember in that moment, like essentially, I couldn't hear my own voice in my head anymore. Like later when I look back on it, I realized it was my brain basically clicked into survival mode. There was no internal monologue. There was no voice. All I remember, it was essentially like a silent video camcorder just turned on and recorded the entire event in my brain. And I remember in my hand trying to desperately reach out to those guys, trying to get my head above the water. But eventually I felt my back touch the sand. A few moments later, one of the lifeguards actually scooped me right out of the water with both his arms. He rushed me right to the shore. I was coughing out water. And the kids, the 4 or 5 kids that I was supposed to be taking care of, they all rushed over to me screaming, Mike, are you okay? And I don't know why, but in that instant, I just immediately thought, I'm wet. Mom's going to kill me. and so I just got up, went to my little duffel bag to have a change of clothes, and I started going up the hill from that lake to change. And people were coming up to me, Mike, we heard, are you okay? And I said I was fine. But it was only until when I got into the changing room that the little recording that my brain did of just those moments in the water turned back on. And I just started breaking down in tears. I think that was for the first time I actually was ever confronted with the fact that I could die. And every time, like, I'm trying to dry myself off, I'm trying to change my clothes, but the replay would just reset and I would just start bursting out in tears again. And it was just, I had never had that kind of moment before where I just really couldn't pull myself together.
And how old were you?
15. Yeah, 15. And
yeah, that would be shocking.
And I remember, one of the guys, one of the dudes who were part of the, that initiation, the hazing, he came into the dressing room to apologize. And, I was able to stop myself from crying for that moment. But, after he apologized and said, it's fine, it's okay, I turned around and just started cussing him out in Cantonese. just because I was so upset. But then once he left, then the recording kicked back in and I just started I was just falling apart. And eventually I just sat down on the bench after I was pretty much changed and I just cried out, trying to pray. And my prayer was simply, Lord, please send someone to help me, heavenly or earthly. And before I couldn't even finish the prayer, the replay kicked back in and I couldn't continue. I couldn't think anymore. I think it was, I don't know how long it was, but eventually this middle-aged dude in a Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts came into the dressing room and he placed his hand on my shoulder. And I had no idea who he was. He was just a Caucasian dude just coming up to me. And when he put his hand on my shoulder, I looked up just out of confusion. But he said, I don't know who did this to you. I don't know what happened to you. What I do know is that you're hurting a lot inside right now. And I just want you to know that Jesus loves you. He then put a little gospel track in my hand and turned to leave the dressing room. But he stopped right before he left the exit and he just looked over his shoulder at me and said, by the way, my name's Michael too. And then he just walks off. And I don't know why, right? The one of the guys who was part of that, he apologized and I still broke down. The replay kicked back in. But after what this guy said, the replay stopped. I was actually able to pull myself back together. I stopped crying. I was able to just regain my composure and go outside and, make it through the rest of the day and then telling my mom, my sister about what had happened. My sister, before she left to head back to her house, she asked me, after all these years of going to church, why is it I have never given my life to Jesus? And so I gave her the whole spiel again, like what I said to you guys. I thought I would just get to my deathbed, I'll accept Christ then, and then I'll go to heaven. And she just immediately kind of pointed out, but Mike, you said when you were in the water, you couldn't think. And if the lifeguard didn't come in time, you would have passed out. And you would not have been able to even say that prayer. So why haven't you come to Christ yet? I didn't have an answer, to be honest. But that was what kicked off that journey for me of finally starting asking more important questions like, is this true? What happens if I sin after I come to Christ? Will he still accept me? Like all these questions that I just did not know the answers to. And I just, one night after all, a few months after that, I just eventually just prayed before I fell asleep, asking Jesus if, I don't know how much faith I have, but apparently if it's as small as a mustard seed, but I have no idea how much faith I have, but whatever that is, I want to put that in you. And that's it.
That's cool.
I didn't hear a voice. I didn't hear any of like that kind of stuff. Now at that time, I have
No,
heard
you've already
his
had
voice.
enough. Being almost drowned was enough. That was that.
And then
was,
having Jesus show up in Bermuda shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, was pretty cool. Or at least the Archangel Michael there. Huh?
That's so cool, dude. And it's there's so many levels of what you said is really interesting. Number one, having a family member that's willing to confront you on kind of your junk, on your BS. Your whole idea, like just being able to say that's your plan and then saying you just went through this and that plan clearly wasn't going to work. And the other thing is, and I think this is what a lot of people struggle with. Not a lot of people want to admit it, but I think even when you're a Christian, even me, sometimes I still want to live my life the way I want to live it. I still struggle at times with no, I kind of want to do this. I kind of want to sometimes I want to make my own decisions, not sometimes, quite often. I think subjugating yourself to Christ's will and his ways it is a discipline. I think that's why kind of fasting becomes kind of a really important part of people's lives, because it's if you can do that, then it's you can do just about anything. You can subjugate just about any other part of your life to that. But let me ask you a question regarding, you said your experience going to a Chinese church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've never been to a Chinese church. What was that like compared to our experience, what you expect me and Rich to have experienced?
Well, I'm from San Francisco Bay Area. I've been to a
I know,
Chinese
it's true.
church.
Your church was at that square
now.
with all the homeless.
There's all kinds there.
Yeah, it is still, I still consider it my home church, even though my wife and I are no longer there. We are in a church now that's part of a denomination and it's multi-ethnic, very diverse. The city of Quincy that we live in now is also pretty diverse. It's just growing in that. That's just kind of part of the par. But I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up, I'm not even joking, a 5-minute fast walking pace to Chinatown, right? It was a neighborhood just outside of the Chinatown border. And if anything, I think one of the things that people might be surprised, especially churches that are right in the city and very ethnically centric, right? So it's a church that is catering toward Chinese speaking populations, but this church had been around for decades. And so eventually it started seeing first, second, and third generation ABCs, which is American born Chinese. Basically folks like me who can recognize a little bit of Chinese, maybe Toisanese, a little bit Cantonese, maybe Mandarin, but pretty much what we speak at home with our parents is Chinglish, not Chinese. and so we're kind of in that weird space of one foot is in very westernized thinking and culture and education, but then another foot is totally in the cuisine, the culture, the customs, the traditions of whatever your parents, taught you when you're growing up. I think the church that I was at, this Chinese heritage church, one of the unique things about it was started by a church planting missionary pastor who got trained in Kobe, Japan. He was Cantonese speaking, and he and his wife moved to Boston to minister to the Chinese in Boston. And eventually he teamed up with a social worker who worked in the Chinatown area. And eventually somehow those two, and that just those two different kind of perspectives of life, yet somehow he created this synergy to actually start up Bible studies, start up a church where, yes, it was very biblically grounded, very orthodox and traditional in its thinking and theology, but also very much caring about the people of Chinatown, how to care for what's going on within the city. I mean, Boston's Chinatown has gone through a lot. I was even just telling this to Ron at one of our own recordings for the podcast, that back in the 50s, when one of the major highways was being built in Massachusetts, the politicians essentially, without consulting any of the residents within Chinatown, decided we'll just build the highway right through that neighborhood and essentially bulldozed all these homes, all these buildings, and displaced over 8,000 Chinese people from just that neighborhood. 1/3 of the land that was Chinatown was just gone. And that was kind of the stuff that the church that I went to cared a lot about, right? So it's not only just sharing the gospel, it's also making sure that the people in the neighborhood, in the vicinity that our church was in, was taken care of. Also on, the physical needs, on the spiritual needs, on the actual representational needs within the city government even. And so it was a really great environment, honestly, to have grown up in that. And I mean, I had countless mentors, a lot of older guys that I looked up to. My dad was a restaurant worker, and I pretty much did not see him most of the day. He would basically work from the afternoon all the way into like the twilight hours at the restaurant. And so as I was growing up, I didn't know it at the time, but I was looking for a lot of male role models. And I saw it in a lot of these guys that basically taught me this is what it means to be a godly Christian man. And I wanted to emulate that because they were so cool. As a 15, 16-year-old kid, I'm seeing these guys and they just had such character that I just wanted to be like them.
That's admirable. Did you get a sense that that the older generation that maybe came from the homeland, came from China or something, did you get a sense that they kind of appreciated the freedom of worship there as like we're in that church as a compared to their previous experience? Did any of that filter in?
Yeah, I would definitely say that was definitely a part of it. The whole migration of Chinese folks in general to the United States, a lot of that influx, especially in the 60s and 70s, was because of concerns about what was going on between China, with Hong Kong, with Macau, with the surrounding area. And I mean, my parents came to the U.S. partly because of what was going on when China was rattling its saber, and people were concerned about would they come into Hong Kong before the official handover in 97? Would they actually be willing to wait? And so a lot of folks came in, and then the same thing in the 80s, another influx of folks came in because of political tensions that were going on within the region. And so a lot of folks within the Chinese heritage churches, they come from this kind of background where we came to the U.S. because of the freedom that is here. And also they were trying to run away from particular ideologies.
Yeah, it's interesting. You asked the question, the differences, and what Mike explained about his life in that congregation is the exact thing that my wife did. Korean. They're, and Koreans in California. They came after the Korean War. They came there. All the Koreans gathered, and all the Koreans came very Korean centric, right? It was all about, the Koreans and things that are in there. I think it's just a natural thing for most people to gather with those that they're more familiar with culturally and things like that. I mean, when in the Bay Area, I would go to Kojik's and it was all black people in the congregation. I mean, I was usually the only white dude wandering around. They have many Spanish churches, that were there were 95%. I think it's kind of normal at times for that to happen. You can tell the difference in how we are because our generations are different than those that came from other places and things because we're more comfortable with that diversity in our congregations.
I mean, yeah, and Rich, to your point, I think it is something that's just it's a common pattern amongst immigrant-based churches, right? Because a lot of churches, if they are started very ethnic-centric, a lot of that is because that community is trying to pull together on how to survive in a land that is not their own. And to be able to speak and to share the customs and foods and everything, even the heart language that they grew up with, right? Even if they could speak fluent English, and yet if it's not the heart language, the language that they grew up in as a child, there's a significant difference. And so it is very common to see that kind of thing happening. And it's always kind of the difficult transition of what happens when you go from the original generation that planted and started that church into the next generation that's primarily speaking English or more Western in their thinking. Can they hold together? And to my home church's credit, I mean, they're pretty much now into the 5th, 6th generation now. And they're still learning and they're still growing. But it is one of those rare things to see, a church that is still trying to honor its origins, the older generations, and also just the change in culture just from multiple waves of immigration, and yet still being that one church to try to cater to all the needs of the folks that are coming. So I mean, I look back, there's a lot of fondness. And I owe a lot of the spiritual growth in my own disciplines because of that church.
That's awesome. Do you get a sense that they have a heart for people? I think now we kind of get a better understanding of maybe what people in China are going through, the oppression, the religious oppression that they go through. Mm-hmm. And I get that, like, they got a lot of problems, even here in the States, like, we got a lot of stuff we got to deal with on our own. But do you feel like at any point did you get a sense that they cared about what was going on back home? Or is it more like maybe because that highway project that was just coming through, it's like, hey, we got enough problems here, we need to focus on what's going here?
No, they definitely are always concerned. Mm-hmm. I'm still on their newsletters. I still see the things that they send out to pray for and the issues that they prayed for. I mean, when COVID was a glimmer in a lot of people's eyes of just like this distant thing that's probably not going to affect us, friends from my old church, the newsletters, we were all aware. We all were aware of what was starting to spread. We were all concerned. In some sense, I think the friends and folks that I know from my old heritage church, they had COVID on their radar at least a month before anyone else was. Mm. It just was, because relatives are still there. Family is still there. Friends are still on the other side of the world, and just being concerned about what is happening. And so I think that like it is still a concern, yes, for the homeland, yes, for those on the other side. Just because we're here does not mean that we've lost any love or care for the place that we had to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I asked that because we see here in America, at least, America has a lot of countries are mission-minded, as they should be. I think Christ has put it in our heart to be that way. But I guess like probably the major countries you hear about are, well, I'll include just the continent of Africa. Then we hear a lot about China, the concern for China, like being a mission field. And then you hear a lot about Israel. Not, I think that's a little bit of a difficult piece to dice up, but I guess we hear a lot about the care, the concern for the church in China. I might have talked about this on a previous podcast, but we had, there was someone that came to our church from China, a church planter, and a number of churches there. And at one point, he said, "We pray for you. We pray for the church in America because we see the problems you're going through." And I want to say that he might have said something like, "Do not pray for the freedom of the people of China," because he's like, the oppression that we're facing causes us to grow more. We grow quicker. Like our reliance is entirely on Christ and his power, and like we are more powerful. We're more devoted because of it. He's like, "Don't pray for our freedom." He's like, "We pray for you." And that just crushed me. It crushed me to think that the church in China is praying for me. And yet I see it. I totally see it in our comfort here in America. We don't have to rely on him as much as they do.
It's interesting though. I actually believe that it's much harder here to be a Christian than it is almost anywhere else in the world because of all of the things that we've had going into our minds since the 1970s, 80s, the constant amount of noise, the things that we can do, the apathy that has been there, the fights that have gone on. I never thought that it was easy to be a Christian in America.
Yeah.
I mean, people think that I have the freedom to worship, right? Like that's what people say. You also have the freedom to go out and obey Jesus Christ in the streets, loving people, the prison, the poor, the broken, and the hurt. But where have we gone? Yeah. Many times.
There's so much. I think we just become so dulled. And so there's so much deception.
It's idolatry. People's faith is in a different system than the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
Their allegiance is to a far different system.
I find that I remember, I don't agree with one particular, he's kind of a famous pastor or preacher these days, but there was one thing that I remember him saying that did strike me as a young Christian. We want to be comfortable. And that as Christians, that is the thing that we most desire is to be comfortable, right? To have a nice retirement, to have a nice life, to have a nice career, to have a nice boat, a nice house, a nice car. And it's just one of those things that I know at least consistently in his life, his whole entire call to Christians was to don't waste your life and to actually to care about the mission, to care about the spreading of the gospel to all the nations. If anything also as well, at least what I've learned and I still keep from my old days from my Chinese Heritage Church was the very top concern of God to be on a mission to spread the gospel to local and also abroad. Mm-hmm. Right? It just was a consistent thing. Even though the church is non-denominational, it took part of its name is evangelical, and the church really took that part of its name to heart. That we are evangelicals, not a political thing. It's about basically we care about the gospel. We care about evangelization. We care about sharing the news of who King Jesus is. And so that was always a part of my upbringing as well, of that constant reminder of short-term missionaries, long-term missionaries, being a missionary within your own local context, being involved in our outreaches within the Chinatown area. That was just a part of it. And not even just short-term outreaches, long-term summer projects, long-term projects within Chinatown to show we're not just here to just preach and proselytize. We actually care about the concerns and the needs of the people of Chinatown. And I think that's part of what gives the character to the church, right? That people realize there is something about this group that is more concerned than just simply, are we getting enough donations? Do we have enough souls saved? But even if I never make a decision for their God, do they still love and care about me as a person? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I look back at that time and there's a countless amount of reasons why my wife and I are no longer there. But I still pray for them and I still hope for their continued success and also growth as a church in that area.
It's a good story. So pivoting a little bit, you talk a little bit about your work with Awakening. So maybe some of this audience does or doesn't know, but Awakening is a school that Mike Kaiser created. What year was it? Around what year?
It was. I would want to say it was around 2019 was when he got that started. It was before the pandemic basically just shut everyone down. Right,
but it was basically he wanted to bring people that didn't have the time or the ability to go get a seminary education. Mm-hmm. He wanted to make that kind of content accessible for other people. So you work there. That's one of your day jobs. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Awakening and kind of its mission.
So I'm the academic director of the Awakening School of Theology. That basically means I am the one that primarily interfaces, talks with instructors, scholars, doctorate level folks to build out content, especially courses within the school. Dr. Heiser, Mike, he had started that school years ago because he knew there were a lot of people who were interested in the kind of research and knowledge that he has been gathering, the tools and just the know-how. But at the same time, they would not have the amount of time or even the funds to be able to go to seminary, but they want to learn. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of the mission of the school, is to make that available to folks who may not even know that this type of research, this type of knowledge is actually available to them. And so, unfortunately, before he passed away, Carla, the president of our school, she asked him, for a list of possible candidates who could actually take his place when he did pass. And he recommended me as one of the choices. And so wow. Carla and I
high honors, Mike, high honors.
I mean, I was surprised, to be honest, because I had helped Mike a couple of times, especially once he found out about his cancer. He talked with me asking if I could help him with a lot of. So he did these live question and answers for the school, right? So every time folks would be taking one of the classes, you were actually privileged to have a set time every week to meet up with Dr. Heiser and to just have like a live QA, ask him questions like that you have from the class. And so he asked me to be on board with those live QAs with him, especially once he started going through the chemo. And if he couldn't make it, or if something happened, he wanted there to be sort of a backup. And I was, in many ways, that kind of backup. And if there weren't any questions from the students, I had plenty of questions of my own. Mm-hmm. I wanted to just dig his brain and just as much as I could if there were no questions from the other students. But it was an awesome time to be able to have essentially just like almost like a Zoom meetup with Mike and to just pick his brain about all the various random questions that we all had. Yeah. And so, yeah, that was a part of it. And eventually when he mentioned to Carla about having me take over his position, I was shocked, to be honest, because I was getting ready to graduate with my MDiv, but I technically was not done yet. And so I was like, what am I doing? I took a day or so just to talk it over with my wife. And one of the first things she asked me was, do you want to do this? That was her main question to me. And I said, yes, but is it too soon? If you want to do it and Mike's asking you for help, go for it.
So about how many classes are there put together?
I don't know the exact number. I'm pretty sure we're over 20 courses now.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Heiser, before he passed, he had created a list of courses that he would like to have created. And it was kind of dubbed this wonderful little name of Seminary on a Thumb Drive. The idea being that eventually, once all these courses were created, that for folks who, especially if they are in a location where it's not easy for them to access Bible education, seminary education, or some sort of training, that they would be able to receive these kind of courses like on a thumb drive, for example, so that they could get this kind of training. They could get some training in theology, some training in the languages, some training in biblical studies, and to help these pastors, these missionaries, these folks who are working in far off places.
And for the people in far off places who don't have access to any of that we still have to some extent, for them out there, because that was really the people who we had a heart for many times, because we'd hear from. They don't even have a book in some of their languages. They may have a Bible, but they don't have a single book I remember when my brother from Iraq was telling me what they had in Arabic or what he could share. And it was one A.W. Tozer book, which is awesome. Thank God for that. And then it was like the purpose-driven life. And then one other thing. He was like, this is what I have access to. Like that is easy to find for me and all of these people. Incredible, right?
So are you looking at creating translations of these courses as well?
So there is in the works of translating, pretty much like we're trying to translate all of our course catalog into Portuguese and also into Spanish. And so that's part of the efforts. And we've been raising funds within the school to be able to actually do that now. I mean, last year the school went to a completely donor-based model. Originally, when the school got started, starting a theology school is expensive. And so we used to sell the courses, $200, $300 a pop for each of the courses. And people would have access to them for over 2 years. Eventually, last year, we moved to completely being donor-based. And so all the courses are now available for free for everyone and anyone to take, whether you give or not. But it's essentially available to now anyone who has internet access and you have an email. You can create an account.
So if you want to get, going to help that so much get out there. I mean, I'm able to give it to people in places that they're not going to have $300 in Nigeria, to just be able to drop on a course. But since they speak English as one of their main languages, I'm able to go ahead and hand that over to them.
That's awesome.
So that was important.
I think that's really powerful because, I mean, a lot of people like this content. That's why they're watching this podcast, or while they watch Naked Bible or something like that. It's they like this content, and now they can get essentially a seminary education from Mike. And even the courses that he wasn't able to complete himself, it's still kind of along the same track of the same idea of the things that he thought were relevant. To giving us a very specific picture.
Set of things that, he would go over and be like, this is important and this isn't. You can skip like a year of study and you could do it in 3 weeks if you just look at it, look at this, And what courses do you see coming up? Or what kind of things are, coming up?
So what's currently coming down on the pipeline, like today, actually, we have actually the last course that was part of that original list that Mike had written out. That is nearing completion. We're actually, the instructor I was talking with a little bit earlier today, he's on the last bits of filming and recording the last parts of that course. So it will be coming out in the fall. And so officially that whole entire certificate of 12 courses will be finally done.
That's amazing.
It was definitely a project to work on. If anything, one of the best bits about it was getting to reach out and talk with all these, especially biblical studies scholars, right? It's like they're basically in the same field of study that Mike was in, where it's about biblical studies. You're examining the gravel a little bit, but at the same time, their work is so important because they're basically thinking about maybe a passage or a whole entire book of the Bible, their whole career, that they're just trying to bring out from the language, from the culture, from the research, what is going on within this book. And that was just one of the best things of just interacting with them, and for them to actually bring that research and that learning to folks who didn't even know that this is out there, that this is actually available, that they can learn this stuff about the scriptures.
Give us some of the names of some of the courses and maybe who taught them, like some interesting names of courses and who taught them that you think would kind of pique some interest.
So one of the courses that were taught actually by one of the last PhD students that Mike had essentially supervised, Joel Mudamale. He taught 2 courses for us. The best one, I think, is the Doctrine of the Holy Spirit. In that one, he went into essentially who is the Holy Spirit, like where do we learn more about him? What does he do? What is his involvement within the church, within the body of Christ? Other folks as well that I would point out, Matt Halstead. He is a New Testament scholar. He recently actually just helped us finish an First Enoch Book of the Watchers seminar in the beginning of July. It was a one-day seminar that we did. We had folks who, our students within the school, and we were able to do a live seminar with them, with Matt, as he taught through essentially, a big swath of the Book of Enoch, in particular, the Book of the Watchers, which was something that, Dr. Heiser had always cared about people understanding and learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how Matt tied it in, particularly to its relationship to New Testament thinking and the New Testament authors like John or Paul or Peter. And so, those are some of the other courses that are in the works or have been worked on. Dr. Ron Johnson, he helped us out with a number of courses within the school. He helped us with the orientations in the Old and New Testament books. He's helped us out with the class called Doctrine of Salvation. And so, it's just a whole swath that we're just growing out within the school and just reaching out to new scholars who actually have been learning about Mike's material after he's passed.
Mm.
And they're interacting with his research material with their fields of study. And so some of the folks that have been helping us out are not necessarily biblical studies. They're more biblical systematic theologians, but they're being challenged by the biblical study material that Mike had been bringing out to light and just making this available for them to understand and incorporate into their research and into their teachings.
That's awesome. So I want to encourage listeners, anyone that hears this, I want to encourage listeners to, like Mike said, they're on donation based alone. And even if you don't plan on taking the study courses, if you would be willing to donate to Awakening just to help finance things like these translations in other languages, because that's expensive, that matters. And that's what kind of sends the gospel in other places. And the point of this is that Awakening wants to train up pastors, new leaders, like, people in countries that don't have access or ability to go to seminary. They can now get a good seminary training, but it kind of needs to be in their language, And I think with the advent of AI, some of that can happen probably at a more rapid pace. And we're hoping, like Mike and I just had a conversation about that last week. But still, like, humans have to get involved and we have to pay for their time. So even if you don't plan on taking the courses yourself, if you'd be willing just to donate, just to help someone else take the course, just to keep the effort going, because as we all know, it takes money to keep the lights on. It takes money to keep people like on mission and doing this stuff full time. They got to pay bills. They got a house payment. They got, an electrical payment. They got to pay their own bills. And so I just want to encourage you guys. There is the Michael Heiser Foundation. That's one thing, and that's okay. If you're donating there, great. And then there's the Awakening, and they're separate. One doesn't feed into the other. They don't kind of, we are related, but they're two separate entities. But we just want you to pray about it. And if you feel led, put some effort into one of those efforts, or both if you're led. Because I think Awakening is really, really, really vital, and I'm excited about it, and I really want it. I really want it to move forward. Like, I'm super excited about it. How can sorry, I tell people that, where can they go to make a donation? Like, where does that happen?
They can go right to the main school's website. It's www.awkng.com. And there's a donation button. You can click on that and it will take you to all the information about becoming a vision partner. That's what we call the folks who have been partnering with us, essentially to provide all this course content and the overhead and just the logistics and everything to keep the school running. Last year, when we switched over to the donation model, our goal was to hit about 700 vision partners who would commit to donating $40 a month. Like that was all Carla, where she figured out what was the logistics, the overhead, how to make sure that we can also have enough funding to create 4 courses a year. And so that's basically it. That's the minimum. And the Lord, God he's blown me away by how he has taken care of the school.
Yeah.
Because I mean, to be honest, I was scared of switching over to the donation model. I mean, I'm not sure how is this going to work. It was, and then just to now see how God has been taking care of us.
And it's kind of like, it's very similar with the Bible Project. The Bible Project is donations, and with the donations, like they have just been able to do so much. They're not doing seminary on a thumb drive. They're not doing this. They're doing kind of like bite-size, Bible study type things for home groups and whatnot. But this is like, I think this is where some people can really sit down and get like a big, fat, juicy theological steak and chew on it for many, many months at a time. Like if they want, and they can just go in and do a course or 2 if they want, but if they want to go through everything, they can.
And even for folks who may not be interested in taking a course, like one of the initiatives we began last year as well was a Bible reading plan, where just read the Bible along with us. And if you have questions about the particular book of the Bible that we're reading for our reading plan, submit the questions to the school. Because what we do now, and one of my other hats is that I am also like a co-host of the AWKNG Ask a Scholar podcast. And that whole entire idea is we gather the questions from our students who are just reading the Bible, just the Bible. They have a question about like, who the heck is Ezekiel? Like, why should I care about this book? And we find a scholar who has made that his or her focus for research. Mm-hmm. And so we start asking those questions to the scholars and have a conversation on the podcast about that. And so real people are asking real questions that are being asked to someone who is actually in that field of study. And that it's been an immense blessing for me to be able to just go into just bringing these kind of questions to these scholars and then realizing, like, wow, these are really great questions. And just like knowing that it's coming from people who are actually reading the scripture just through a normal daily reading plan. And yet they're coming up with these great questions that are challenging even the scholars when they answer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So they can do that at www.awkng.com.
Yes.
Okay. You guys
all right, Mike, and what has your experience been like going through seminary and your doctorate?
I mean, it may be a little weird to hear it, but honestly, seminary was actually what kept me going in my faith, to be honest. I know a lot of times people would hear stories of like how seminary destroyed a person's faith. The rigor, the study, it can be draining. But part of the reason why seminary was so essential for me these last 8 years, really, was because of the kind of hardships and things that happened in my life and in my wife's life. Right? I avoided seminary for as long as I could, if I'm truly just being honest, right? Because I met so many people and so many friends who said, I feel called by God. And so they go to seminary. I have no idea if they're called by God, but they got the feeling. And so it was like, okay, I think I've had that feeling, but I'm not sure. Was that also from the pizza? and so I was always kind of not sure and concerned. And then some of these folks, they went to seminary and maybe they graduated, but they're not in the pastoral ministry anymore. And so that also made me concerned. Like, okay, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I should just go about doing my own thing. Long story short, Mike was a part of that whole entire reasoning about why I got interested in seminary. That's another tale for another time. But even just within the first year, my wife and I discovered that the reason why she and I couldn't have kids for so long, it turns out it was something that was actually causing her to eventually become cancer. And I shared about this actually this past Sunday with my church, that I look back at my time at Gordon Conwell, especially those first 5 years, with a lot of fondness, because the training, the education from the professors was amazing. But the Boston campus of Gordon Conwell, every professor that is at Gordon Conwell is also in ministry, whether as a part-time pastor, full-time pastor, or minister somehow within their church, but they practice what they are teaching. And one of these professors, I'm going through her Old Testament orientation class, and we get to the book of Job. And she pauses and kind of insists, we need to talk about the book of Job, because if you are going to become a pastor one day and you're ministering to the people within the body, you have to understand how to take care of people who are suffering. And one of the things that she said, and this was like a few weeks after we learned about what was going on in my wife's body. And she simply just said, we are never given the answer in the scripture about why we suffer for anything or everything, right? It's like we just don't know completely. Job didn't even know by the end of the book. But we also know and learn that God will not waste it. And that has stayed with me ever since. And so throughout my time, as I slowly shared with my professors about what was happening with me and my wife, even after I've taken a class or two from them and I haven't been in their class for a few years, even when I bump into them now on campus or if I email them, they will ask me, how am I and how is Sophia doing? That they are still praying for her. They're still praying for me, that we're still on their minds and their thoughts. And I think that's one of the reasons I can say I look back at my time in Gordon Conwell as essential, that it was what brought me through that dark season of life, but not just through it. I didn't just survive it, but I learned how to metabolize it as well. I learned how to actually process through. I learned things from my professors, not just education-wise, but also just in practical wisdom-wise, how to deal with pain and how to be a minister to those who are also going through hardship and pain. So yeah, seminary was amazing, but it really was because it was character forming for me.
That's really awesome. What you say reminds me of a song. Well, you mentioned something, and it reminds me of a song / a little snippet of John Piper. And it is also from Job. So Shane and Shane are probably some of my favorite. They're like my favorite group. They've been my favorite group for like, oh my gosh, well over 20 years. I bet I've seen them in concert 4 times, and I just love them. I love their heart. I love the heart. Like
I've never even heard of them.
You haven't, dude. You got to get it. Well, it may not be your thing, but yeah, I love them because their heart, like their heart, the lyrics that they do, there's no pretentiousness. You can tell it's like, well, I need to come up with a song, and so let me just come up. No, they're legit. Anyway, the song I'm talking about is, and it's a heavy song, but it's called "Though You Slay Me," and it's based on Job 13:15, and they have that quote, "And though you slay me, yet I will praise you." And then at some point in there, in the video, you can look it up on YouTube or Spotify. It's in there, but they kind of bring the music down a little bit, and then John Piper comes in there and talks about that, like, and he's doing a sermon. He's like, I don't care if it's if it's cancer or criticism. I don't care if it's all the things that can impact your life. And he was talking about how it is not meaningless, that it's totally worth it when looking at the scope of the eternity and the glory of what's to come, even though we don't understand it. And I remember that kind of had an impact on me. And I don't listen to that song all the time. I really like it, but it's a heavy song. And someone like you that's gone through it would be a heavy song. Like I've gone through some heavy times, and I can't always listen to it because maybe I relate too well sometimes, but I love it. And that's really cool that a professor would take that time, because you're right. How are we going to minister to people? And that's actually something I've contended with. And over the past few years, for a long time, I remember I was very uncomfortable with people when they were suffering. Mm. And I felt like it was my obligation to tell them something to make them feel better.
A prescription? You gave a prescription? Yeah. You're like, here, let me tell you this verse here that goes along with your hurt there, and that should
or
be
something
enough.
Super cheesy, like, well, I guess God just want another angel up in heaven, something stupid like that. But I just started learning that we just don't know, and sometimes I just kind of learned to sit with them and say, hey, man, I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through. I'm certain it just sucks. I'm certain it sucks. And I don't have any magic words that can make you feel better, but I just want you to know I'm here with you. I'm here with you. If you want to scream, if you want to cry, if you want to get angry, if you want to punch the wall, man, I'll be here. Let's hang out. Like
most of the time we want to have a conversation about how hard it is to be sick or go through these things and not have someone tell us what theologically we need to do. We need to be able to express our pain, our hurt, our suffering, like when it's like for those who are like, well, I'm going to be sick the rest of my life. You're like, well, that's fine. All right. Well, you still have to do all the things that you got to do. Many times they just want to be heard. They want to be able to talk about that, but that is probably one of the more harshest things. I don't know what it's like in other countries. I have no idea as far as it, but people who are sick in this country do not get treated all that well. People don't, they don't know how to deal with it. Just like you said, right? That's just not a tool that we have to comfort those who mourn.
Yeah.
And
we're so, and here in America, we're so productivity driven. It's like, if you're not productive, what use are you, and even I, as a man, kind of struggle with that. It's like, as I'm getting to the age where it's like, career aspirations and things may be changing. It's kind of like, what does that mean for me? Because as a man, I think we still want to feel productive. We still want to feel like a useful member to our family, a useful member to society. Like we're doing something that matters. And here in America, it's on steroids. It's like, how are you contributing? That's why we work so much. That's why we work so often and hard. It's not great.
And so where are you at? Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, Mel, like one of the things about Shane and Shane, the one song that keeps coming up in my mind every so often from them was Under the Sun.
That's a good song too. That's old school.
It's old school. It's a song that's just basically the chorus is one has to get over. Mm-hmm. One has to get over the sun. It's
it's from Ecclesiastes, I think, right?
Yep. The whole song is about the Kohelet, the teacher, the speaker of Ecclesiastes, saying how life is so meaningless. Everything is vain under the sun. Mm-hmm. And the chorus is basically screaming, we have to get over the sun, because the whole way that Ecclesiastes is framed is when you're just stuck under the sun and all you can see is just from this vantage point, of course it feels meaningless. Mm-hmm. And the only way is to rise above that sun, to go above to the sky, to look above, to look beyond the vantage point. But it's hard, especially in the moments of pain and hardship. Yeah. And if anything that I had learned, especially over these last 8 years, was as a minister, as a pastor, one of my goals is to help, even when my wife could not talk to God, to be what God actually was trying to say to the three friends in the book of Job, what they did wrong. Mm-hmm. They basically talked about God. But Job was the only one out of all of them who actually spoke to God. Every time in the book of Job talked, his words were actually directed to God.
Yeah.
Not about God, not about how his ways are. He's actually saying, I need you to come and talk to me. Mm-hmm. Why is this happening? Yeah. And he was actually saying the words directly to God. And one of the things I learned is maybe one of the things we do not so well in our culture and society. We do a lot of speculating, but we don't sit with people to actually, okay, I know you can't say anything, but let me talk to God for you as you're here with me.
Yeah.
And to petition and to intercede with them, even if they can't say anything at that moment.
Yeah.
Because the pain is too strong.
Yeah.
But to actually bring them right to the throne and to talk to him, even yell at him because of your confusion and your hurt and your pain. But that is also what it means to be authentic and to be honest.
Yeah. I think it's so cool that the books like that Job, where he was very raw and honest with God, and just a whole litany of the Psalms where David is, he's running from Saul, and he's being really raw and honest with God. Speaking of which, the thing that's along the same lines of that, I think something that it's just been peeking at my heart for a long time is everyone loves to reference people like say, I have my Goliath, or I'm facing my Goliath. And they make a big deal out of the David and Goliath. And I think we love that. But what they don't realize is that David was already prepared for Goliath. Mm-hmm. He'd already spent his whole life up to that point was in preparation for Goliath. And Goliath was, once and done. One shot, done, and he was done. David's real struggle, David's real character development was in the desert and in the caves running from Saul for a long, long time. Just like Job's character development was in all of that suffering. And I've been getting a lot out of Job and out of those Psalms. They've been real meaningful. And taking this full circle back to Shane and Shane, probably like they did a couple albums on Psalms. And I want to say it's like Psalms 46 was a good one. It's probably one of my favorites. And Psalm 45 is another one of my favorites of their songs. So go out and listen to them, folks. You guys need to be Shane and Shane aholics. Highly recommend it.
I'll have to look them up and see what that is. But let's go ahead and finish it out and ask Mike. I'm going to ask you what your fondest memory of Dr. Heiser is. But I remember when Mike first got sick and I went to see him and we were sitting talking. I told him, I said, one of the strangest things that you're going to find is that you are going to have to comfort people far more than you're going to be comforted when they show up. Because when I was in the hospital and the people would visit me, like that's what it was. They're like, they can't believe that you're there. And you're like, no, it's okay. It's okay that I'm here. I remember he had an interesting, look on his face.
Crazy.
When I said that.
Yeah. One of my fondest memories is, it was actually before he discovered he had cancer. The reason why it was also kind of prominent was because, when I look back at it, and my wife and I have talked about it so many times, we saw glimpses of something's not exactly right, but we couldn't put our finger on it. But I remember, it was a bunch of us who were helping him out with his social media work. And so graciously, he took us out on this boat ride, in the bay of the Jacksonville area. And so I got a chance to just talk with him. And one of the things that I was going through at that moment was I didn't exactly feel always comfortable, even at the church that I'm at. And just wondering, should we stay? Should we go? What was going to happen? And one of the things he said to me was, throughout his whole entire life, he has never been able to be at any church where he was 100% comfortable, where everything was exactly the way that he would like it. The music was what he liked. The preaching was what he liked. Like all that. It's not every. He never had a chance where one church was meeting all of the check boxes. But his main consistent prayer and desire was, I just want to be useful. And I remember after he said that has stayed, that has struck me so hard. That whatever giftings, whatever talents that I may have, and wherever we are at, if we're not being called out of, what then can I contribute to the body that is here? Can I be useful? And so that has been a part of my has been part of my own value system for the last couple of years, ever since that conversation with Mike. And is one of the most frequent things I remember about him, of just knowing, he had options. He could have gone to many other different churches. He could have done other different things. He could have, church shop like many of us have done in the past. And yet his concern was, can I be useful here? And I think it was very humbling.
That's awesome. I think that's a good lesson for us all. That's the whole point that Rich and I do this, is like, how do we be useful? How do we be useful? That's awesome. That's a really good word.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. You have anything else you want to say? You got anything else on the docket that you need to get out there?
Definitely continue to listen to the DCW podcast and Awakening's Ask the Scholar podcast if you get a chance. Other things down the line for me is I'm hoping to eventually finish this Doctor of Ministry degree program that I've been in for the last 3 years. It's been awesome in the fact that my cohort is probably one of the most international cohorts that Gordon Conwell's had for, like, at least in recent memory. And I just love those guys to death. Every one of the folks in my cohort are deep down communicators, preachers at heart, and they care about sharing the gospel. And it was just one of the coolest things to just be there with guys who've been pastoring for over 10, 20 years even. And yet they are still hungry to learn how to be better, to care for their congregations better, to have better training, and to even take what they learn and bring it back to places like Nepal or to Indonesia, and just have the better training for those who are laboring for the gospel. So if anything, that's just kind of what's down the line. I hope eventually something like a course for Awakening will come out from all this. Part of my research is on the Book of Job and how it can be better utilized by pastors, especially in circumstances where they're trying to counsel and comfort and care for those in their congregations who are going through chronic pain, chronic hardship, long-term issues, how to actually love and care for the people who are not necessarily in the mood to sing a very happy, jolly worship song, but who are still coming because this is supposed to be where the family of God is at. And so how to better minister to folks who are going through questions that we will probably never get the answer completely to, but who are still enduring.
That's awesome.
All right.
Well, I do want to say to the folks, the audience, once again, if you want to donate to the Awakening School, it's www.awkng.com. If you want to donate to the McLeod, which is now the Michael S. Heiser Foundation, go to their website. You can do the same. We appreciate any of your consideration. It really helps out, and we really help this, just helps move the gospel forward. That's all we care about.
All right. And thank you very much, everyone. I want to give a shout out to a few people who emailed me. Ron out there in Delaware, who's going to be teaching a fall class on the DCW there at one of the prisons. Brother Joseph, who's in Michigan, going to be doing something similar out there trying to do that. Thank you, Mitch. Gonna hear from you on Tuesday. I look forward to it. We just thank you everyone for, listening, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.